Have you ever felt tired? Not the kind of tired that sleep can fix, but the kind that lives deep in your soul. The exhaustion of always explaining yourself, always justifying your choices, always trying to be understood in a world that rarely takes the time to listen. If you've ever felt that weight, you're not alone. There comes a moment in life when silence becomes your greatest strength, not because you have nothing to say, but because you finally realize not everyone deserves access to your truth. You begin to understand that peace isn't found in convincing others of your worth, it's found in choosing yourself, fully and unapologetically. This is not about giving up. This is about rising up. It's about stepping into a version of yourself that no longer needs validation to feel whole. It's about healing without the performance, growing without the noise, and loving yourself in the spaces where others once overlooked you. Today, I invite you into a new kind of power. The power that comes when you stop explaining, start listening to your own voice, and choose yourself, even when it's hard. Because that's where real healing begins. Many people don't realize that the constant urge to justify their actions, decisions, or even feelings is not just a personality trait, it's frequently a trauma response. When someone grows up in an environment where they felt judged, misunderstood, or emotionally unsafe, they learn to survive by anticipating others' reactions and over-explaining to avoid rejection, conflict, or abandonment. It becomes second nature, a habit wired into their nervous system. If I can just explain enough, maybe they won't leave, maybe they'll understand me, maybe I'll finally feel accepted. This pattern can follow you into adulthood. Whether it's in relationships, at work, or even in casual conversations, you might find yourself going into unnecessary detail, offering lengthy justifications for simple choices or apologizing for things that don't require apologies. You do this not because you want to, but because a part of you fears the consequences of not doing it. Somewhere deep down, there's a belief that you need to be understood to be safe, that your voice needs to be softened, filtered, and reshaped just to be heard without judgment. It's exhausting. Over time, constantly explaining yourself drains your energy and distorts your sense of self. You begin to question your instincts. You overthink your words. You replay conversations in your head. You start wondering, did I say too much? Did I explain it clearly enough? Did they take it the wrong way? And even when you try to pull back and say less, guilt kicks in, a strange discomfort, like you're being rude or selfish just for keeping something to yourself. But that guilt isn't truth, it's conditioning. Many people associate silence or brevity with coldness or rejection, but the truth is, it takes strength to allow your choices to stand without needing validation. It takes healing to sit with the discomfort of being misunderstood and still not over-explain. And it takes deep self-awareness to realize when your urge to explain is no longer about clarity, but about seeking approval from people who may never give it. This response is especially common among people-pleasers, perfectionists, empaths, and those who have experienced emotional neglect or criticism in formative years. In those environments, love was often conditional. You were accepted when you were agreeable, approved of when you were easy, validated only when you met expectations. So now, as an adult, you try to earn connection the same way, by softening your truth and diluting your boundaries. But true connection isn't built on explanation, it's built on authenticity. You don't need to justify why you're tired, why you said no, why you changed your mind, why you left the room, why you're choosing your peace. Healing begins when you realize that your boundaries, your choices, your emotions, they're valid, even if no one else understands them. And that's the root of it all. Over-explaining is about seeking external permission to honor your inner truth. But the more you heal, the more you realize you never needed permission in the first place. You just needed safety. And safety starts when you stop handing people your story and start holding it close. Not out of secrecy, but out of sovereignty. The urge to explain yourself will ease the moment you recognize that your worth isn't found in others' understanding, it's found in your ability to stand in your truth, quietly and fully, without needing to be approved. Healing begins when the noise of justification is replaced by the quiet of self-trust. Choosing silence isn't about shutting people out, it's about protecting your inner world. Many people associate silence with avoidance, passive aggression, or weakness, but when you look deeper, you'll find that silence can actually be a powerful and intentional boundary. When you stop explaining yourself, stop justifying your every move, and stop engaging with people who constantly question your choices, you're not avoiding conflict, you're simply choosing not to exhaust your energy on conversations that don't lead to understanding. You're learning that not everything deserves your response, and not everyone has earned the right to your vulnerability. In a world that glorifies over-communication, silence can feel uncomfortable, even rebellious. We're taught to always be available, to respond immediately, to justify our absences, and to explain our feelings in detail. But there's a quiet kind of strength in learning when not to engage. When someone misunderstands you and you choose not to defend yourself, that is strength. When someone expects you to argue and you remain still, that is strength. When someone pushes for answers you're not ready to give and you say nothing instead of explaining, that's you protecting your peace. Silence becomes a boundary when you use it to withdraw from chaos, manipulation, or energy-draining conversations. Some people don't want clarity, they want control. They question you not because they care, but because they want you to feel small, unsure, or guilty. Explaining yourself in those situations is like pouring your truth into a cup with a hole. No matter how honest or detailed you are, it will never be enough. That's when silence isn't just helpful, it's necessary. It's your way of saying, I'm not going to participate in this dynamic anymore. People who respect you won't need excessive explanations. They'll feel your truth, even in your quiet. But those who constantly demand you justify yourself are often trying to test your boundaries, not understand them. When you stay silent, instead of reacting, you shift the power dynamic. You take back control of your emotions, your voice, and your space. And that control doesn't come from domination, it comes from self-respect. Silence also gives you the space to hear yourself. When you stop defending your decisions out loud, you begin to listen inward. You start asking, why do I feel the need to explain this? Who am I trying to please? What am I afraid will happen if I say nothing? These are important questions that often get buried under the noise of constant communication. When you're silent, you're not being passive. You're creating room for clarity, introspection, and deeper healing. You're choosing to honor your emotional bandwidth. It's also important to understand that silence doesn't have to mean physical absence. You can be fully present, yet remain emotionally and energetically quiet. You can listen, nod, and disengage from drama without ever needing to raise your voice or defend your choices. This kind of silence isn't a wall, it's a filter. It lets in only what aligns with your peace, your healing, and your growth. In the past, you may have been taught that silence makes you weak, or that not explaining yourself makes you arrogant or cold. But the truth is, the ability to remain silent in situations where you once would have argued, overshared, or defended yourself, that's emotional evolution. It's the difference between reacting to every spark and choosing what's worthy of your fire. It's no longer needing to be understood to feel whole. When you treat silence as a boundary, you no longer beg to be heard. You simply walk in your truth, knowing it speaks louder than any explanation ever could. Self-gratification is one of the most powerful and transformative forms of healing because it comes from within. When you stop looking outward for approval, recognition, or reassurance, and begin turning inward to affirm your choices, feelings, and identity, you build a foundation of emotional security that no one can shake. It's common to grow up believing that you need someone else to tell you you're enough, smart enough, good enough, lovable enough. But that belief is often formed in environments where love, praise, or safety was conditional. When external validation was inconsistent or absent, you learned to depend on others to feel worthy, often chasing approval just to feel okay. The problem is that external validation is fleeting. One day you'll be praised, the next day you might be ignored or criticized. And if your self-worth is tied to those responses, your confidence becomes unstable. You start living on a roller coaster of other people's moods and opinions. Your peace is always one comment away from breaking. But when you begin validating yourself, telling yourself that your feelings are valid, your decisions are right for you, and your value doesn't shrink because someone else can't see it, you begin to free yourself from that emotional dependency. Self-creditation doesn't mean that you ignore feedback or refuse to grow. It means you become your own anchor. You trust your inner voice more than the noise around you. You don't wait for others to clap for your progress. You learn to celebrate yourself even when no one else notices. This is not arrogance, it's self-respect. It's understanding that you're allowed to be proud of how far you've come, even if others don't see the full journey. It's also the quiet confidence of knowing you made the right decision, even if it disappointed someone else. When you validate yourself, you stop chasing after everyone's approval and start focusing on what feels aligned for you. You say no without guilt. You change directions without apology. You walk away from what doesn't serve you, not because someone gave you permission to, but because you decided your peace matters more than pleasing people. This kind of healing takes time, especially if you've spent most of your life trying to meet expectations or avoid judgment. At first, it might feel unfamiliar or even selfish to stand by your choices without explaining them. But over time, you begin to see that the most stable kind of peace comes from within. You start asking yourself, what do I think about this? Instead of, what will they think about this? And that shift is powerful. That's when you start living authentically. Another key part of self-critication is emotional honesty. You stop suppressing how you feel just because someone else thinks you're overreacting. You stop needing others to agree with your emotions in order to honor them. You begin to say to yourself, I feel hurt, and that's okay. I feel unsure, and that's human. I feel proud, and I'm allowed to feel that. You become a safe space for your own feelings, rather than outsourcing that safety to others. What makes self-contribution so healing is that it's consistent. People will come and go, approval may rise and fall, but when you build a strong relationship with yourself, you always have somewhere to come home to. You no longer need to shrink to be accepted or perform to be loved. You are enough because you say you are, and that belief is unshakable. You stop waiting for someone else to name your worth because you've already claimed it for yourself. The truth is, people who genuinely understand you don't need constant explanations. They don't demand that you justify your boundaries, your silence, or your growth. They simply feel your energy, your intentions, your presence. And that's enough for them. These are the people who recognize that your no doesn't require a follow-up paragraph. They don't take offense when you choose solitude or when you outgrow old conversations. They understand that love doesn't always need words, and that connection often lives in what is unspoken. When you find yourself over-explaining or constantly defending your choices, it's often a sign that you're speaking to someone who's either unwilling or incapable of seeing you clearly. You may feel the urge to explain your silence, your distance, your healing, but the people who truly get you won't need that. They won't push you to be more than you are, or guilt you into being someone you're not. That's because their understanding of you isn't conditional on your performance or your constant emotional availability. They respect the quiet seasons of your life just as much as the loud, expressive ones. On the other hand, people who constantly question you, misinterpret you, or require lengthy justifications for your actions are often not really interested in understanding. They're interested in controlling the narrative. They want you to explain, not for clarity, but for comfort. Your silence makes them uncomfortable because it reminds them they don't have access to all of you anymore. And that loss of access feels like a threat to their sense of control or entitlement. When you stop explaining, you start seeing who respects your boundaries and who only respected the version of you that didn't have any. It's eye-opening. You begin to realize that real connection doesn't come from you bending over backwards to be understood. It comes from mutual recognition, a sense of, I see you, even when you're quiet. I get you, even when you don't say much. And in those moments, you feel safe. You feel whole. Because you know you are being seen without having to perform. Some people will never understand your growth, your silence, or your shift in energy. They were meant to be part of a chapter, not the whole story. Healing often comes with detachment, and detachment often exposes relationships that were built on conditions, not true acceptance. The more you evolve, the more you attract people who align with your energy and repel those who only understood the unhealed version of you. And in that process, you find your true circle, the ones who don't need constant explanations because they feel your heart, not just your words. There's also something incredibly freeing about no longer needing to explain your piece. You stop trying to make others comfortable with your boundaries. You stop softening your voice so others can digest your truth more easily. Instead, you begin to trust that the right people will lean in with empathy, not interrogation. They won't take your silence personally because they know it's not rejection, it's restoration. They won't demand reasons for your growth because they celebrate it, even if it means growing apart. When you stop explaining, you create space for deeper, more authentic connections. You attract people who love the real you, not the version of you they can mold or manage. You stop feeling exhausted by relationships that require you to constantly justify your existence, and you begin to rest in the peace of knowing that the people meant for you will always feel you, even in your quiet. They'll respect your space, honor your journey, and never ask you to shrink your truth to make them feel safe. Healing doesn't happen in the noise of justification. It happens in the quiet of self-trust and inner presence. When you are constantly explaining yourself to others, you're often more focused on being understood than actually understanding yourself. You're pouring energy outward, trying to be heard, trying to be validated, trying to make sure no one misunderstands your intentions or choices. But true healing begins when you step back from that need and allow yourself to sit in stillness, where your only task is to listen, not to others, but to your own voice. Stillness is uncomfortable at first, especially if you've spent most of your life being reactive. You may have been taught that silence is a void that needs to be filled, that your value comes from how much you say, do, or explain. But the truth is, stillness is not a lack of action. It's a powerful form of alignment. In stillness, you begin to hear the thoughts behind the noise, the beliefs behind your reactions, the wounds behind your over-explaining. You start to recognize that many of your words were rooted not in clarity, but in fear. Fear of being judged, abandoned, or misunderstood. As you become quiet, you realize that healing isn't always loud or visible. It doesn't need to be announced. It doesn't come with applause. Healing is subtle. It's choosing not to respond to provocation. It's feeling the need to explain and choosing not to. It's knowing you could defend yourself, but realizing you no longer need to. This level of inner restraint is not weakness, it's wisdom. It's the understanding that not every comment requires an answer, not every misunderstanding needs a correction, and not every judgment deserves your energy. In stillness, you start to release the pressure to be constantly understood. You recognize that some people will twist your words no matter how carefully you speak. Some will project their own insecurities onto your silence. Some will create narratives that have nothing to do with your truth. And instead of chasing after those people to clarify or fix their perception, you begin to let go. You allow people to think what they want, and you reclaim your peace in the process. That's not giving up, it's rising above. The beauty of healing in stillness is that you become more present with yourself. You learn to sit with your discomfort instead of silencing it through distraction. You observe your triggers instead of reacting to them. You start making choices that honor your growth instead of explaining your growth to people who aren't ready to receive it. You begin to protect your energy like it's sacred, because it is. This kind of healing also strengthens your intuition. When you're not caught up in constantly explaining or defending yourself, you have more mental space to feel what's right for you. You can sense when something is off, even if it looks fine on the surface. You can trust your instincts, even if they don't come with a clear explanation. That's because stillness sharpens your inner awareness. You stop needing logic to justify every decision. Sometimes, you simply feel what's right, and that feeling is enough. When you stop explaining and start observing, you shift from reaction to reflection. You create space for your emotions to be felt, processed, and released, not debated or defended. You heal not because others finally understand you, but because you finally understand yourself. And in that understanding you find peace. Not the peace that comes from fixing everything around you, but the peace that comes from being okay with not needing to fix anything at all. Just being. Just breathing. Just choosing yourself in the quiet. Choosing yourself is one of the most radical and powerful acts of healing. It means putting your peace above approval, your growth above guilt, and your truth above the expectations others have placed on you. For so long, you may have been conditioned to believe that choosing yourself is selfish, that you should always consider others first, sacrifice your needs, explain your boundaries, and bend so no one else feels uncomfortable. That belief often comes from early patterns of people-pleasing, where your value was tied to how much you gave, how much you accommodated, or how well you fit into roles others assigned to you. But choosing yourself doesn't mean abandoning people. It means no longer abandoning yourself. It means tuning in to your own emotional needs and honoring them, even if that disappoints someone else. It means saying no without needing a long explanation. It means walking away from environments that drain your energy, even if others don't understand your decision. It's the moment you stop asking for permission to rest, to grow, to let go, to change, to simply exist in alignment with who you truly are. This process often begins in quiet moments, when you realize that constantly choosing others has left you feeling empty, misunderstood, and unseen. You recognize that you've been shrinking to make others feel secure, softening your truth so others don't feel challenged, and explaining yourself to avoid being judged. But then something shifts. You begin to see that no one is coming to save you. No one is going to hand you the freedom to live your life on your terms. That permission has to come from within. And when you give it to yourself, everything changes. You start protecting your peace like it's your home. You begin making decisions that feel right in your body, even if they don't make sense to others. You stop second-guessing your instincts. Stop dimming your light. Stop shrinking to fit. You may lose people in the process, people who are attached to your compliance, not your authenticity. But what you gain is far more valuable: clarity, strength, alignment, and self-respect. You no longer feel the need to explain your healing to people who only knew you in your brokenness. There is often grief that comes with choosing yourself. You grieve the version of you that stayed silent just to keep the peace. You grieve the relationships that couldn't withstand your growth. You grieve the time you lost trying to be everything for everyone. But through that grief, there is also liberation. You begin to feel lighter. You begin to breathe deeper. You realize you don't owe your suffering to anyone. Not to be loved, not to be accepted, not to be enough. Choosing yourself is not a one-time decision. It's a daily practice. It's waking up every day and asking, what do I need right now? And then actually listening. It's giving yourself grace when you fall into old patterns and gently guiding yourself back. It's learning to trust your own voice again, the one that was buried under years of pleasing, performing, and proving. And it's standing firm in the knowing that you are allowed to be whole, even if others liked you better broken. As you choose yourself more consistently, you start to attract relationships that are rooted in truth, not convenience. You begin to surround yourself with people who don't require you to shrink, who don't need endless explanations, and who celebrate your boundaries as signs of self-awareness, not rejection. And in those spaces, you grow deeper into yourself. You begin to love the person you're becoming, not because the world approves, but because you finally do. At some point in your journey, you will realize that the loudest kind of strength is often found in your quietest moments. When you stop explaining yourself, when you walk away without guilt, when you choose yourself without apology. Healing doesn't always come with grand declarations or visible change. Sometimes it arrives silently, in the calm of your boundaries, in the stillness of your presence, and in the peace of your choices. You don't owe your growth an explanation. You don't have to be understood to be valid. Your healing is yours, and it's sacred. So, choose silence when it protects you. Choose yourself when it frees you. And choose peace every single time it's offered. Thank you for taking the time to sit with these words and reflect on your own journey. It takes courage to face yourself, to grow in silence, and to rise without approval. Wherever you are in your healing process, know that you are seen, you are supported, and you are more powerful than you realize. Trust yourself, stay rooted in your truth, and keep choosing you, even when it's hard. You've got this. Good luck on your path, and thank you for walking this part of it with me.